your life. All you gotta do, admit to your sin and let Jesus in. Really want those things? Then you better be ready, 'cause things are gonna change. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready tonight? Someone's been waiting for you, the love of your life. Stop right where you are, reach out your hands and pray. Jesus, I am a sinner, I need you in my life. He's gonna change you today, better thank him for that. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready tonight? Soul, you wanna be complete? Well, take a simple step. You gotta call out to him. Stop wasting time, his love can't be beat. Be the best you can be, this could be your night. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready tonight?
soul to tell of all you've done. Awaken my heart, awaken my soul to sing of your great love. The darkness here, where the lions wait. You sent from heaven and you rescue me, rescue me. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Awaken my heart, awaken my soul to tell of all you've done. Awaken my heart, awaken my soul to sing of your great love. I will run hard into your arms, Lord, you carry me. Despite my pain, your plan remains. You will deliver me. You sent from heaven and you rescue me, rescue me. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings. Awaken my heart, awaken my soul, tell of all you've done. joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will. I count on one thing, the same God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God is never late. He's working all things out, working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will. I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify, glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will for all my days. Oh yes, I will.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. No, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. For every war he wages, he will win. And I'm not backing down from any giant. I know how this story ends. Yeah. Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Come on, declare it, church. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it.
With the coronavirus, I think that I disagree. But you haven't even heard what I have to say. Won't make a difference. I already made up my mind. When I hear my side stance on something, I believe it before they're even done saying it. And I despise you, as do I, even though I know nothing about you as a person.
You're wrong, I'm right, and you should listen to me.
Hearing you say that makes me have a boiling rage in here, which makes me think what I'm gonna say next is highly logical, nuanced, and considerate. The problem with nuanced thinking is I like to be lazy and not think for myself. So automatically assuming my side's always right and your side's always wrong keeps me from having to use my, what's it called? Always believing I'm right and you're wrong makes me forget that most of the time we're both probably wrong. I look like I'm listening, but I'm not. I'm just rehearsing what I'm gonna say next.
I believe that there is no right or wrong answers. I believe that none of us know the truth. None of us know what is actually going on. We only have our opinions and perspectives. We only have our opinions and perspectives.
It's obvious that more division is the solution to all our problems. I'm certain I'm right because the emotional intensity I have in here validates the truth of what I think. I am unwilling to consider how that could be true, but tell me more. Cheers to hatred. The feeling that brings us all together.
Look, I may not agree with some of the stuff that I'm reading or some of the stuff that my friends are sharing. However, who am I to say that I'm right and you're wrong? When I want to be right, it's my ego. It is my ego that says that in order for me to be right, you got to be wrong.
Is anyone else tired? And I don't mean like, man, I could use a nap tired, or I stayed up a little late watching a movie tired. I mean this kind of tired. The kind of tired that has me saying, look, not today, Satan. And him saying, oh, thank God, even I can't deal with your life right now. In this season, for the last several months, there's been a weariness that I have carried in my soul that I have not been able to put words to. Just a soul-sucking kind of tiredness that I haven't understood. And it's interesting because it's reminded me of something that my grandma Lefebvre used to say. She was my mom's mom, and she and my grandfather, they were in active ministry for more than 50 years, and so she was the person that probably most informed my role as a pastor's wife. My goodness, she was dutiful. She was the dutiful pastor's wife, but she was sassy. The woman had a Harlequin novel collection. Grandma, my goodness. But after her mother died, she used to refer to being homesick. She would say, oh, I'm just so homesick. I just want to go home. Now, I was a child at the time, so I didn't fully understand, but in more recent months with this weariness and this heaviness, I've gotten to where I recognize that feeling, but I still didn't have the words. Until I saw this picture the other day. Take a look at this. You'll recognize this modern-day philosopher, good old Shaggy and Scooby. Look at all this hate, Scooby. The monsters really are always human. In that silly picture helped me put words to where I finally understood, I finally discovered why I'm so weary. It's you. It's all y'all. It's people. You are wearing me out. It's the way that we refuse to offer each other any measure of grace. It's the way that we refuse to give each other the benefit of the doubt. It's the way we hate so easily. Josh Wilson is a Christian vocalist, and he wrote a song recently called Revolutionary, and it raises two important questions. The first one is, why does kindness seem so revolutionary? Why does it seem so unconventional to be nice, to be kind, to be gentle? And the second question is, when did we let hate get so ordinary? Man, I wish I knew. As a child, I remember there being times when I would watch grown adults be in conversation over a topic on which they disagreed. And by gosh, by golly, they could have a whole conversation on a topic. They could start and end as friends, even though they didn't see eye to eye. And they would, at some point in the conversation, come to a place where one or the other would say, you know what, it's probably best that we just agree to disagree. And then they would move on and talk about something different. And what was interesting is not only did they start and finish as friends, but they might have even been better friends. They might have come to a place where they knew each other better and maybe even knew something a bit more about the topic they were discussing because they were willing to listen. They were willing to lean in. They were willing to engage each other. They were friends from start to finish. As I got a little bit older, I would hear that same phrase, I guess we're just going to have to agree to disagree, but it would sound more like this. Well, I guess we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I guess you're welcome to be wrong. And you fast forward even a few years later, and I remember there being times, perhaps you remember, maybe you'd be on the way to a family friend's house, and the conversation on the way would be something like this. Well, here's all the things we're not going to talk about. Here's all the names we won't bring up. And suddenly topics had become unsafe to even raise. All the way to today, where there are people in our circles that if they don't hear their opinion come out of your mouth, they come out swinging. And I just find this progression so alarming and so wounding in my spirit. And it's worn me out. I've raised the question multiple times in the last number of months with different people. Most recently was actually with Regina Tyson, Pastor Tommy's wife. She and I were together earlier this summer, and I asked her, from your perspective, now she's taught high school for more than 2 decades now, and so I just asked her, I said, have you seen this trend where you spend the bulk of your time? And what's it look like from your perspective? And it was interesting. She did say, she said, I have seen an increase in hypersensitivity, just, us needing to be extra careful not to hurt feelings and that sort of thing. But she said, when I really saw an uptick in this was just after 9/11. It was September of 2001, just days after 9/11. And she said the students in her class, her high school class, were having a conversation, of course, about the events of that day. And one student made mention of the Muslim pilot who'd flown his the airplane into the World Trade Center. And another student, just that quick, barked right back, well, you're just a racist bigot, he said. To which the first student said, well, I didn't say all Muslims were bad, I just was referring to that one pilot. To which the second student responded, well, now you're just being biased. And it was fascinating to me the way that Regina responded to the students. She said, yes, that student is biased, but so are you. So are all of us. She said we all have a bias. We all have a worldview that's based out of our personal experiences. We all see the world a very particular way. Sometimes it's based on how we were raised. Sometimes it's based on any number of things, but we all have biases. She said the trick isn't in claiming that we don't have them or pretending not to have them. The trick is about learning to acknowledge the biases we do have and being willing to listen, to lean in, and to learn from others. The Apostle Paul had something to say about this as well. In his letter to the church in Rome, the book of Romans chapter 14 is where we're going to spend our time today. We're going to walk through that chapter together. It was in the church in Rome, in this time, there were 2 very distinct groups. There were people who'd come to faith out of a tradition out of the Jewish tradition, and there were also people who'd come to faith out of a pagan tradition or even just an unchurched tradition. And there were 2 issues that Paul addresses in chapter 14 that were dividing the church in this time. One of them was diet, what they ate. You had a group of believers who'd come out of the Jewish tradition that had learned to adhere to hundreds of rules that dictated how they did their lives, including what they ate, when they ate, whether it was clean, whether it wasn't clean, how they prepared it. And they had learned that holding to those rules was how they honored and acknowledged God. They were accustomed to behaving a certain way. They were accustomed to a certain diet. People who'd come to faith out of a pagan tradition, well, they ate whatever they darn well pleased before they came to Jesus, so they were going to keep doing that after they came to Jesus. So you can see how that would have created a tension. There was another issue that was, it involved the day that they worshiped. Again, when you look at Jewish tradition, there were lots of rules that dictated how people in the Jewish faith, how they worshipped, where they worshipped, when they worshipped. And again, you had people who had just come to faith in Jesus who were accustomed to a certain way of life, following a certain set of structures that they used to honor and acknowledge God. People who'd come to faith out of a pagan tradition, every day was the same. Why does it matter what day we honor God? In fact, let's honor God every day. And so again, you can see how it could create a tension. And what was interesting was, these two warring factions in the church, they just didn't know how to disagree. You had former Jews on one side of the aisle wagging their fingers at the liberal pagans, and you had pagans on the other side, former pagans on the other side, wagging their fingers at the legalistic Jews. And these differences of perspectives, these differences of life experiences, these biases were causing divisions that Paul needed to address. And so he does. So let's take a look at chapter 14. He starts right off with verse 1 that says this: "Accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters." There's three things I want us to see here. He starts with accept the one, not tolerate the one, not put up with the one, not huff and roll your eyes at the one. Accept the one. Accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters. The second thing I want us to see is just those last two words, disputable matters. What the Apostle Paul is basically saying is the things that you're arguing about, we as a church family, we just spent the last month reading through the book of Ecclesiastes. We know that pretty much everything is meaningless in light of comparison to who God is and the work that he's doing. So here's Apostle Paul telling the believers in the Church of Rome, you know what? This is meaningless stuff. You're fighting over what you eat and what day you worship. This is meaningless. They're disputable matters. Stop. And I have to confess that the third thing I want us to see actually stems from the very first time I read this verse, most recently, "Except the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters." Which of the two sides was Paul talking to when he says, "Except the one whose faith is weak"? Is he talking to the former Jews or the former pagans? Because depending on how you answer that question, tells you who Paul thought had the weaker faith. Well, that kind of got my brain thinking. And actually, if you read through chapter 14, Paul answers that question. But the way that my mind worked, when I read through that the first time, it got me thinking. Now, let's just be honest. When we cross paths with someone whose spiritual practices are a little bit different than our own, what's our natural inclination? Well, they're just not as spiritual as I am. Clearly, their faith is weaker than mine. So Paul knew to get the attention of either side, he had to say, "Except the one whose faith is weak," because you know good and well they each thought the other had the weaker faith. Eugene Peterson in The Message, he says it this way. Romans 14:1 in The Message reads like this. It says, "Welcome with open arms fellow believers who don't see things the way you do. And don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you don't agree with, even when it seems they're strong on opinions but weak in the faith department. Because remember, they have their own history to deal with, so treat them gently." I love that. Now, the next few verses in chapter 14 are actually about the food issue that we discussed already. So let's move on to verse 4. And here's what verse 4 says. "Who are you to judge?" Who are you to judge? Who exactly do you think you are? This brings to mind the conversation that God had with Job in Job chapter 38. And these words are so pertinent for us today. Hear this. When God says, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" Tell me if you understand. And who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who are you to judge? Now, mind you, it's not an easy thing to keep our snap judgments at bay. I get it. Think of the last time you saw a homeless fellow holding up a sign at an intersection. What'd you think? Get a job. But you didn't even stop to think that just maybe that was a military veteran with undiagnosed PTSD that can't yet hold down a job. What about that couple enjoying a kiss at the booth across from you at a restaurant? What do you think? Get a room. But you don't even stop to consider that maybe they're en route to the airport where he's going to fly off for overseas business and not be home for the next month. You don't ever stop to think about the fact that there might be more to the story that you don't know. That's why one of my morning prayers every day is a prayer for peace. Read this with me. Search me, O God, and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me closer to your heart, where your peace that transcends my own understanding will guard my heart and my mind. So let's jump back into chapter 14. Verses 10 through 12 read like this. You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Why do you even bother to cast judgment? Why do you treat them with contempt? We're all going to stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me. Every tongue will acknowledge God. And verse 12 says this, so then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Wait, no, who? Each of us will give an account of who? Our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers. Each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. So here's Paul saying, mind your business. There are too many of us right now running around pretending to be the hands and feet of Jesus, but instead we're acting like judge, jury, and executioner. We're pretending like we're doing God a favor by making sure everyone behaves the way that we think they should. And my favorite, if we're being entirely honest, my favorite are the people who behave that way and then use Scripture to justify that. Because, let's be honest, 2 Opinions 3:15 does say that I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. By way of example, and now this is meant to be silly, but it can also be entirely sobering. When you start picking and choosing scriptures to suit your needs, take a look at these two verses paired side by side. Matthew 27:5 says, Judas went away and hanged himself. We'll partner that one up with Luke 10:37. What do you get? Go and do likewise. We got to be careful, because here's the thing. As Rachel Held Evans once told us, if you are looking for verses with which to support slavery, you're going to find those verses. If you're looking for verses with which to abolish slavery, you'll find those. If you're looking for verses with which to oppress women, you'll find them. But if you're looking for verses with which to liberate and honor women, you'll find those too. If you're looking for reasons to wage war, you'll find that in the Bible. But if you're looking for reasons to promote peace, those verses are there too. If you're looking for an outdated, irrelevant, ancient text, then that's what you'll find. But if you're looking for truth, believe me, you'll find it. This is why there are times when the most instructive question to bring to the text is not, what does the text say, but rather, what am I looking for? I suspect Jesus knew that when he said, ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. She goes on to say, if you want to do violence in this world, you're always going to find the weapons. But if you want to heal, you will always find the balm. The Apostle Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:15 to do his best. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who doesn't need to be ashamed, but one who correctly handles the word of truth. Guys, do you understand it doesn't take much more than just a misreading of Ephesians chapter 6 and we're going to be wielding our Bibles at each other like weapons? I mean, it is called the sword of the Spirit, right? So it must be meant for my enemies. So do me a favor, church, would you stop whatever it is you're doing right this second? Just stop what you're doing and repeat after me. If it has skin, it is not my enemy. If I can see it with my eyes, it is not my enemy. Let's jump back into Romans 14. Let us stop passing judgment on one another, Paul says. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. I was introduced recently to a remarkable woman, a friend of a friend. Her name is Rhonda Yoder Schrock, and if you ever have opportunity to read her work on Facebook, I highly encourage it. She says this. She says, you can be pro-human without being pro-behavior. She said, you can love your fellow man without loving what they think or do. She said, if you call yourself a Christian, this isn't optional. If you say you love Jesus, but you don't love those he made, the world is never going to want what you have, and I don't blame them. Back to Romans 14. Verse 19 says this, let us make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. It says, don't destroy the work of God for the sake of food, for the sake of disputable matters, for the sake of meaningless arguments. Let us make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. Now, what? What? Now, that doesn't say, let us do all we can to make sure everyone agrees with me. That doesn't even say, let us make every effort to do what leads to rightness and singularity of thought. Well, no, Hitler, it doesn't. Let's read it again. Romans 14:19 says, let us make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification. Don't destroy the work of God for the sake of meaningless arguments. And guys, the work of God, hear this, the work of God is the redemption of all of those differences, those life experiences, those worldviews, those biases. Because if we lean in, if we learn and we listen, God can use those differences in such a way that everyone can come to know him. Everyone can come to love him. Everyone can be exactly who he made them to be, whether or not it happens in a way that we understand and agree with. Now, I get it. So much of this need to be right actually often, believe it or not, comes from a genuine place. I've had conversations with people that I would lovingly refer to as spiritual bullies, and I hear them say things like, well, but I just want to do what Jesus wants me to do. Well, okay, then let's take a look at how Jesus operated. John 13:34 and 35 gives us a shining example of how Jesus conducted himself. If we want to know how to be like Jesus, this is a great place to start. He said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, by your love, will everyone know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Matthew 11:29 is another great example. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Jesus was loving. He was gentle. He was humble. Brian McLaren goes on to give us a few other descriptions of what we can expect from Jesus. He says, Jesus doesn't dominate the other. He doesn't avoid the other, doesn't colonize the other, doesn't intimidate the other, doesn't demonize the other or marginalize the other. He incarnates into the other. He put on skin and moved into the neighborhood for the other. He joins the other in solidarity. He protects the other. He listens to the other. He serves the other. He even lays down his life for the other. So, after reading that, do I really want to be like Jesus? Because that sounds like hard work. There's solidarity, there's advocacy, there's protecting, there's speaking up to injustice, there's serving, there's listening, there's validating the pain. My goodness, even just giving the benefit of the doubt sometimes seems too much to ask. I was with a friend not long ago. We were out and about with our masks on, and I don't even remember where we were, but crossed paths with a gentleman who didn't have a mask on. And we were barely out of earshot, and my friend says, "Oh, just bothers me when people don't wear their mask." Like that last guy, she said, "There's no reason he doesn't have his mask on. You just know good and well, there's no good reason he doesn't have a mask on." And I swatted her square on the hiney, and I said, "You know no such thing." And then we got a good laugh out of it. Except for the fact that what I said was no less true. You know no such thing. Being like Jesus means giving the benefit of the doubt. Being like Jesus means knowing there's more to the story that you don't know. Being like Jesus means not making assumptions. Now, that remarkable grandmother that I told you about earlier, she raised a formidable woman who raised me. And one of the things that my mother taught me, we were in the middle of a conversation one day, and she said, "Now, Bethany, you're making an assumption there." Okay. She said, "Well, you know what happens when you assume, don't you?" "No." She said, "Well, spell it for me. How do you spell assume?" And I said, A-S-S-U-M-E. She said, "Now break it down. And here's what it looks like." She said, "Do you understand when you make a factless, baseless, foundless assumption, you make an ass out of you and me?" She said, "When you come to conclusions that you have no idea about, you make an idiot out of yourself and you make us all look bad." There's always more to the story, she said. There's always something you don't know, much like in this next picture. The text that accompanied this photo said this: "He stands because of his conscience and convictions. He has family that serves in the military, which you wouldn't know just by looking at him. His teammates understand this and they embrace him. But they kneel because of their conscience and convictions. See, their families regularly experience inequality, which you wouldn't know by just looking at them. But he understands that and he embraces them." I know what you say. I hear you saying it. But how badly do you really want to be like Jesus? Because that, what you just saw on the screen, that is what it looks like to love your neighbor. It's putting an end to pretending that we don't have any biases. It's acknowledging that we do. And it's being willing to lean in, to listen, and to learn from someone else's. Guys, we have a beautiful example of this. Actually, it was just on our stage moments ago. John McMullen and Vince Williamson. These two fellas, they could not be any more different. They come from different backgrounds. They come from different parts of the country. They've obviously had different personal experiences, which have shaped their worldviews. If you got into a conversation on politics, you would find them on opposite ends of the spectrum. And yet these gentlemen have been friends for years. They have played together in this band and other bands for years. They don't let those differences keep them from being all that God made them to be, or for encouraging each other to do the same. They are a beautiful example for the rest of us. And here's the good news, church. Lord knows if the two of them can pull that off, so can you. Let's talk to Jesus. Search me, O God, and know my anxious thoughts. Would you see right now if there is any offensive way in me and lead me even right now closer to your heart? Because that's where your peace that transcends my own understanding, is going to guard my heart and my mind. Jesus, teach us how to be more like you. If we could just learn to love like you do, we could change the world.
In a time full of war, be peace. In a time full of doubt, just believe. Yeah, there ain't that much difference between you and me. In a time full of war, be peace. In a world full of hate, be alive. When you do somebody wrong, make it right. Don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine. In a world full of hate, be a light.
In a place that needs change, make a difference. In a time full of noise, just listen.
'Cause life is but a breeze, live it. In a place that needs a change, make a difference. In a world full of hate, be a light. When you do somebody wrong, make it right.
Don't hide in the dark, you were born to shine. In a world full of hate, be a light.
La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
In a race you can't win, slow it down.
Yeah, you only get one go round.
'Cause the finish line is 6 feet in the ground.
In a race you can't win, just slow it down.
In a world full of hate, be alive.
Oh,
When you do somebody wrong, make it right.
You're right. Don't hide in the dark. You were born to shine. In a world full of hate, be alive.
Yeah, it's hard to live in color when you just see black and white. In a world full of hate, be alive.
Amen. Bethany, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your perspective with us today. But I'm sure you could see clearly how we didn't just hear some thoughts from Bethany today. We heard very clearly from God. The scriptures echoed exactly what Bethany was saying, and I just love that. And then what a great capper, right? In a world full of darkness, be a light. Be the light. Reflect the light of Jesus. You know, the few weeks of this series so far, something stood out to me last week. It was actually the youngest member of the worship team who was on last week that after a crazy long message took the time to stop. She's a freshman in college, off her way off the stage to stop and tell me how much the message meant to her, that we were talking about things like race and being right. In our small group last week, it was the high school students who were talking the most and feeling like these conversations were so important. Listen, I think sometimes in all of our rightness, we just think that we've got to let people know, and we've got to let them know with such forcefulness that they get it. But I'm telling you, if that's the posture we take, which is not at all the posture of Jesus, at least not consistently, we're going to lose our kids. We're going to lose our college students who need to see us with love and humility, engaging these things. And even sometimes when we have a different perspective, agreeing to disagree. Church, as we go today, let's, in a world full of darkness, shine the light of Jesus as we put this truth into practice. Thanks so much.